Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome, everyone. As an attending internal medicine specialist, I actually spend a lot of time guiding junior doctors through the wards. And I've noticed that one of the most intimidating challenges you'll face, especially when you're staring down those high-pressure OSPE board exams, is clinical genetics, specifically the dreaded pedigree chart. But listen, here's the secret. It's really not a guessing game. It's actually a strict logical puzzle. So today, in this explainer, we're going to completely demystify pedigree analysis. I'm going to give you the exact foolproof clinical algorithm to look at any family tree and just immediately nail down the mode of genetic inheritance. So, here is our clinical roadmap for today. We'll start by learning the basic language of pedigrees. Then, we'll contrast dominant versus recessive traits and look at male-to-male transmission rules. After that, we'll crack X-linked inheritance, touch on mitochondrial and Y-linked traits, and finally, we'll put the whole shebang together into one ultimate pedigree algorithm. All right, Section 1, the language of pedigrees, and understanding the genetic blueprint. So what exactly is a pedigree? Well, basically, it's a graphical presentation of Mendelian single-gene disorders across family generations. It essentially tracks monogenic traits, diseases caused by a mutation in just one single gene. Think of it as our genetic blueprint for predicting disease probability in a family. Now, what's really interesting here is that these basic shapes are literally the only clues you need to solve those complex exam questions. Squares are males, circles are females. If a shape is solid black, it means the individual is actually affected by the disease. Pure white, that means they're unaffected. And if you see a half-shaded shape or maybe one with a dot in the middle, that indicates a carrier, someone who's hiding the mutated gene but doesn't show symptoms. Keep these shapes locked in your mind, okay? Moving right along to Section 2, dominant versus recessive traits. This is our first major diagnostic checkpoint. Whenever you're presented with a pedigree on the wards or in an exam, this is the absolute first question you must ask yourself. Is there a generation skip? You just scan the chart from top to bottom. Does the disease suddenly disappear in generation 2, only to pop right back up in generation 3? Here's why that matters. For dominant traits, it just takes a single mutated allele to cause the disease. Because of that, there are no generation skips. Literally every generation has affected individuals. Recessive traits, on the other hand, require 2 copies, which allows for hidden carriers, and that is exactly why generation skipping happens. You'll routinely see completely unaffected parents suddenly have an affected child. Now, listen closely to this high-yield clinical rule because it's a real game changer. If 2 affected parents have a completely normal child, the disease must be autosomal dominant. Why? Because they both managed to pass on a normal gene. Conversely, in autosomal recessive conditions, 2 affected parents only have mutated genes to give, right? So they will absolutely, 100% of the time, have affected children. Okay, Section 3, male-to-male transmission rules. We like to call this the chromosome test. Once you've checked for skips, you ask your second algorithmic question. Is there male-to-male, meaning father-to-son, transmission anywhere in this pedigree? You literally just scan the squares. Does an affected father ever have an affected son? Let's think about the actual underlying biology here, rather than just rote memorizing facts. A father has an X and a Y chromosome, right? Well, to make a son, the father must pass on his Y chromosome. He passes his X chromosome exclusively to his daughters. Therefore, logically, if a father has a disease caused by a mutation on his X chromosome, he literally cannot pass it to his son. And that beautifully simple bit of biology gives us our absolute unbreakable rule. In autosomal disorders, male-to-male transmission is completely possible and frequently present. But in X-linked disorders, male-to-male transmission is biologically impossible. Let me just say that again for emphasis. Male-to-male transmission rules out X-linked disorders immediately. If you see even one affected father passing a trait to his son, boom, cross X-linked right off your list. This brings us to Section 4, cracking X-linked inheritance, focusing specifically on fathers and mothers. So the crucial point here is that an affected father's offspring instantly gives away the inheritance pattern. If it's X-linked dominant, he's going to pass that mutated X to all his daughters, meaning 100% of them will be affected. If it's X-linked recessive, he still passes that X, but his daughters just become asymptomatic carriers. In both of these scenarios, absolutely 0% of his sons are affected. But what about the mothers? Well, in an X-linked recessive disease, for a mother to actually be affected herself, she must have mutations on both of her X chromosomes. Think about what that means for her sons.
A son gets his Y from dad and his X from mom. If mom only has mutated X's to give, then every single son she has will inevitably receive a mutated X and be affected. So if you spot an affected mother with all affected sons and unaffected daughters, you're looking at X-linked recessive inheritance.
To really tie this back to the wards, let's look at some high-yield clinical examples. Fabry's disease, which presents with angiokeratomas and renal disease, and G6PD deficiency are classic X-linked recessive conditions. Notice that these are metabolic issues. There's actually a great clinical rule of thumb here. Metabolic conditions tend to be recessive, while structural issues, like achondroplasia causing dwarfism or osteogenesis imperfecta causing brittle bones, tend to be autosomal dominant. Knowing these broad categories really helps you anticipate the pedigree pattern before you even analyze the chart. All right, let's jump to Section 5, mitochondrial and Y-linked traits. This is all about rapid-fire recognition. First up is mitochondrial inheritance, like MELAS syndrome. Think back to your embryology for a second. Mitochondria are inherited exclusively from the maternal ovum. Sperm just don't contribute mitochondria to the zygote. Because of this, if the mother is affected, all of her children, boys and girls alike, will be affected. But if the father is affected, no way, none of his children will inherit it. The father's status is literally completely irrelevant to transmission here. Then we have Y-linked inheritance, and honestly, this one is incredibly straightforward. Since only males possess a Y chromosome, the trait follows a strict male-to-male lineage. If a father is affected, 100% of his sons will be affected, and their sons will be affected, and so on. Furthermore, no female in the entire pedigree will ever be affected or even act as a carrier. A classic, albeit completely benign, clinical example of this is hairy ears. And finally, Section 6, the ultimate pedigree algorithm. Let's see how this all builds together. You really want to treat every pedigree like a strict checklist. Step 1, scan for skips. No skip means dominant. A skip means recessive. Step 2, look for male-to-male transmission. If it's present, it's autosomal. If it's absent, it's likely X-linked. Step 3, check the affected fathers. Are all his daughters affected? That's X-linked dominant. And step 4, check the affected mothers. Are all her children affected? Mitochondrial. Are only her sons affected? X-linked recessive. This right here is your rapid-fire cheat sheet for those OSPE exams. You literally just pair your findings. Skips combined with male-to-male transmission points you instantly to your autosomal diagnoses. A lack of male-to-male transmission points you straight to the X-linked roles. It's pure pattern recognition entirely based on biology. I always tell my junior doctors on the ward, do not overthink. Rely on the absolute rules of chromosomal transmission to find the one true diagnosis. When you feel that exam anxiety creeping in, please don't try to just guess the pattern by glancing at the shapes. Take a breath, mechanically apply the algorithm, and let the rules of the chromosomes guide you to the undeniable clinical truth. So I'll leave you with one final clinical challenge. Imagine unaffected parents come into your clinic and they have a daughter who is severely affected by a genetic condition. Based on the strict biological rules we literally just went over, what is the only possible mode of inheritance? Put on your clinical detective hat and drop your diagnosis in the comments below.